They called it a patrol mission. That's what they told Commander Holt when they gave him command of Dagger 1, an old Terran destroyer retrofitted with outdated stealth tech and barely functional gravity systems. The brass said it was routine: check activity in Sector E-94, scan for pirate nests, avoid confrontation. No one mentioned the Karathi. No one mentioned the so-called Galactic Coalition's interest in the border systems. And no one told him they'd be the last human ship for 200 light years. Holt didn't complain. He was a career soldier, forged in the dying days of the solar conflicts. He'd watched Earth fall into silence after the unification wars, licking its wounds while the rest of the galaxy moved on. The other species dismissed humanity as a burnt-out flame, aggressive, unstable, backward. That's how they liked it. Let them think Earth was done. But Holt knew better. He'd seen the black projects buried under Martian ice. He'd walked the bunkers of Europa, where war machines still slumbered, and he'd read the classified reports. Humanity hadn't been disarmed. They'd been waiting. Dagger 1 entered Sector E-94 without fanfare. 3 days in, sensors picked up wreckage. Alien vessels torn apart, their cores still leaking plasma into the void. Holt's helmsman, Varek, a Terran-born ex-gunner with a short temper and a synthetic eye, muttered something about Karathi war signatures. Holt didn't argue. The Karathi were territorial bastards with a superiority complex the size of a red giant. If they were hitting smugglers, fine. But this wasn't just pirate cleanup. 2 days later, the trap sprung. It was sudden. One moment, clear space. The next, 15 Karathi frigates decloaking in a tight formation, their cannons already hot. They broadcast in broken Earth standard. "Surrender, vessel. Trespassing will be punished by fire." Varek growled. "They think we're flying a cargo scow." Holt said nothing. His eyes traced the enemy pattern. Standard pincer, arrogant, lazy. They expected a surrender, a negotiation, maybe some begging. That's how most Terran ships reacted these days. But Dagger 1 was different. Deep in its belly, beneath false panels and stripped-down decks, slept something ancient. The old systems, forgotten by most of Earth's population. The kind of systems that hadn't been seen in galactic warfare in over a century, not since the last time humanity truly bared its teeth. "Activate Vault 17, Holt ordered quietly. Varek hesitated. "Sir, are you sure?" "Do it." The deck lights shifted. The hum of the ship deepened. Something in the air changed, heavier, like the oxygen itself remembered what it meant to kill. In seconds, Dagger 1 shed its false skin. Stealth modules dropped. Panels hissed open as twin rail cannons deployed from the spine of the vessel. Underneath the bow, the ship's AI reawakened. Valkyrie, a war algorithm banned by 3 interstellar treaties. The Karathi sent another message. It came with a visual this time, an officer sneering, clicking his mandibles. "You had your chance," it said. Holt didn't respond. He just whispered, "Valkyrie priority fire pattern, Sunder protocol." The galaxy had forgotten what human war looked like. They remembered when humans begged, when they surrendered colonies, when they hid in neutral space and signed treaties they didn't have the strength to enforce. But they forgot Earth's rage. They forgot that humanity built war not as a necessity, but as an art. The first rail round tore through 3 frigates. There was no warning, no shield adapted in time, just sudden vacuum and twisted metal. Then Valkyrie locked the rest. What happened next wasn't a battle, it was a cleansing. By the end of the engagement, nothing moved, not even debris. Dagger 1 deployed micro-drones to scour the field, ensuring no survivors, no data relays, no escape. Holt stood on the bridge, watching it all through the viewport, expressionless, quiet. "Message incoming," Varek said. It wasn't from the Karathi, it was a coalition frequency, a high command relay. It simply read, "We did not authorize this. Earth must stand down." Holt smiled. Cold. Grim. He tapped the console and sent one word back. "Denied." The galaxy had just heard a whisper. They didn't know the scream was coming next. The silence after the transmission felt heavier than the aftermath of battle. Varric didn't say anything, just glanced over at Holt with a kind of unease. Not fear, Varric wasn't the type, but respect, the kind you give a man who just willingly picked a fight with every dominant species in the known galaxy. Holt didn't flinch. His hand stayed steady on the console. His gaze remained locked on the field of wreckage. This wasn't the plan. But then again, the plan had always been a lie. They all knew it. Back on Earth, the politicians talked peace, alliances, economic diplomacy. They signed treaties and smiled in front of alien cameras. But under the cities, in the bunkers buried beneath oceans and crust, humanity was still building weapons no one dared mention. Project Afterlight. Operation Godfall. War wasn't gone. It was just waiting for the right man to say, "Now." And Holt had just said it. The Coalition's message didn't come alone. Within minutes, Dagger 1's long-range sensors picked up multiple warp signatures, fast-moving, aggressive patterns, interceptors, maybe even a destroyer. That meant one thing: Earth's leash was being yanked. They wanted Holt to roll over. Instead, he turned to Varric. "Prep the quantum array. We're sending everything to command." Varric blinked. "You want to show them this?" They deserve to know. The Karathi crossed into Terran-marked territory and opened fire. The Coalition backed them. That's a violation of the Accord. We respond. Varric gave a grim smirk. "This'll burn fast." Holt nodded. "Let it." It took 6 minutes for the transmission to burst through the void toward Earth Command. Encrypted, buried in layers of obsolete human code most modern species couldn't even read. On the screen, flickering for only the briefest moment before the feed cut off, was a message Holt hadn't seen in years. "Signal received. Stand by for activation protocol." That was it. No names, no formalities. Just that sentence. Varric stared at the darkened screen. They're actually doing it. God help us. But God had never helped humans. Humans learned to help themselves, with metal, fire, and the will to make the galaxy bleed if it tried to chain them. 2 hours later, in a sector half a galaxy away, the Coalition held an emergency war council. 32 species, hundreds of representatives, all talking at once, all panicked. The footage from Dagger 1 had leaked. Someone, maybe Earth, maybe a rogue AI, had broadcast the entire Karathi slaughter to neutral channels. Every species with eyes saw it, and every one of them understood the same terrifying truth. Humans had been pretending to be weak. For decades, the galaxy had treated Earth like a crippled relic, useful for cheap labor, expendable soldiers, and desperate trade deals. The Terrans accepted the abuse, played the role, even signed disarmament clauses. But it had all been a setup. And now the mask was off. One representative, a grey-scaled, high-ranking Syrah diplomat, slammed his claws on the table. "How long have they had those weapons? Why wasn't this brought to the Council?" The Exthari ambassador, a long-necked being with bioluminescent tendrils, hissed, "The humans deceived us." They played at weakness to hide their strength. "No," came another voice, one calm, calculating. A Goran tactician, old and blind but feared. "They waited. That's different. They waited until we showed our teeth first." Back aboard Dagger 1, Holt stood in the war room. Around him, holograms floated. Tactical data, incoming warp signatures, intercepted Coalition communications. One phrase kept repeating through the static. "Human escalation is unacceptable." He chuckled, low and bitter. "They call it escalation," he muttered, But they had their boot on our throat for 60 years. Varek leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They forgot what we really are. Holt turned to him. Do you remember the Helix Protocol? Varek's eye flickered. God, yeah. Urban myth. Supposedly Earth's got a fleet no one's seen in 100 years. No IDs, no markings, just sitting in dark space. Holt tapped a hidden console panel. Beneath it was an old key. Not digital. Physical. He slid it into the lock and turned it. The interface lit up in red. Helix Protocol activated. Sleeping fleet awake. Targeting parameters pending. Varek stepped forward slowly, eyes wide. You're really doing it? They crossed a line. A chime echoed through the bridge. Valkyrie spoke, her voice smooth, almost gentle, but chilling underneath. Message from Helix Fleet Command. The Leviathans have turned. Estimated arrival, 36 hours. Outside, Dagger 1 drifted silently among the debris of a dead Karathi squadron. But all across the stars, old human ships were coming online. Dark, cold monsters from a forgotten era. Carriers the size of cities. Frigates with weapons no current tech could block. Engines that ran on dying stars. The galaxy had pushed Earth long enough. Now it was humanity's turn to push back. And there would be no mercy. The stars didn't look any different. But they felt different. Every crewman aboard Dagger 1 could sense it. The pressure, the weight, like the galaxy was holding its breath. Holt stood on the bridge in silence, eyes fixed on the star map as red icons began blinking into existence one by one. Those weren't enemies. Not this time. They were ours. The Leviathans had awoken. 36 hours hadn't passed yet, but some ships were already slipping into real space. Massive, slow-moving behemoths, blacker than the void around them. Ships built before humanity had even made contact with the Galactic Coalition. Ships never recorded, never acknowledged, and never ever seen again after the final solar concord went dark. Fully operational, Valkyrie responded without emotion. Leviathan Prime reporting optimal combat status. Helix Group coordinating under Black Command authorization. Black Command. The term hadn't been used in nearly a century. It meant one thing: autonomous war mode. No politics, no oversight. Just mission parameters and execution. This wasn't about diplomacy anymore. This was retribution. In coalition space, chaos was spreading. Civilian transports rerouted away from human sectors. Trade lanes were shut down. Entire governments pulled envoys from Earth, demanding explanations that never came. The Terran government had gone silent. Not a word from the politicians, not even denial, just static. And the slow emergence of Leviathan warships from dead zones no one dared chart. The Ravager of Silence came first, a floating city with 6 rotating gun arrays, each capable of firing projectiles the size of cruisers. It slipped from the shadow of a neutron star, accompanied by 3 escort destroyers. Then came Ghostfire, Nemesis Spear, Old Earth's Grief, names whispered like curses in forgotten war circles. To the other species, these were new threats. To humans like Holt, they were old friends. Varek turned away from the console, his voice hushed. We're waking nightmares, Commander. We're not declaring war. We're reminding them what it feels like. Holt didn't answer at first. His thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered his brother, killed in a Karathi raid during the silent disarmament years. No help came. The coalition filed it under regional instability. No reparations, no justice. Just a ceremony on Earth, a few medals, and a closed coffin. Holt had stood there, watching dignitaries lie through smiles while alien ambassadors offered apologies like they were reading off a script. Now the galaxy would learn that every apology had an expiration date. Helix Fleet is requesting lead ship. Valkyrie announced. Varek looked over. They're asking for command? No, Holt said. They're giving it. He stepped to the center console, inserted his palm into the ID slot. A pulse ran up his arm. Old codes verified. Classified clearance accepted. Black Command Authority. Granted. Commander Holt. Designated Flagship Lead. Dagger 1. Full Leviathan protocols enabled. Varek exhaled. We're leading the fleet? Holt looked out into space, quiet for a moment. We're leading the reckoning. The first target was chosen by consensus. Not political, not strategic, symbolic. The Vada Prime Relay, an orbital station run by the Coalition's High Tactical Command, located near neutral space. It was the broadcasting hub used to monitor all human movements, trade, and fleet traffic. For 60 years, they'd used it to track, control, and choke Terran influence. Now it would burn. The Leviathan fleet didn't approach quietly. They arrived with weapons charged and shields active. They didn't respond to hails. They didn't explain themselves. They opened fire. Old Earth's Grief launched a kinetic rod from orbit. Pure tungsten, 30 meters long, dropped from high altitude at relativistic speed. The impact turned half the station into a crater before the alarms could even finish blaring. Within minutes, 3 more Leviathans closed in. Pulse torpedoes, disruption cannons, weapons that warped shielding tech, bypassed armor, and ignited atmosphere. Vada Prime never had a chance. No prisoners, no survivors, no transmissions made it out. The message was clear. Earth is no longer taking orders. Back on Dagger 1, Holt watched the destruction unfold through a live feed. He didn't flinch. He didn't celebrate. He simply said, "Prepare the next jump. We're not done yet." Varek glanced at him, eyebrows low. "Who's next?" Holt looked at the updated list coming in from Helix Command. "Whoever thought we were finished." The stars were bleeding. At least that's how the sensor readouts looked from orbit. Holt stood motionless as Dagger 1 coasted over the charred remains of Vada Prime. The orbital debris field still pulsed with radiation, streaks of vaporized hull plating burning through space like arterial blood. Human war tech wasn't designed to cripple. It wasn't surgical. It eradicated. And now the entire coalition understood what that meant. They weren't just facing another enemy. They were facing a species that had been insulted, humiliated, and patient. Too damn patient. Varek stepped into the bridge, eyes shadowed by fatigue. He hadn't slept in a day, not since the Helix fleet began mobilizing in full. No one had. Sleep felt like a luxury they weren't allowed anymore. "They're pulling civilian traffic out of 47 systems," he muttered. "Coalition's treating human space like a black zone. Total avoidance." Holt didn't answer. He kept his eyes locked on the drifting skeleton of what used to be one of the galaxy's most secure military satellites. It took only minutes for humanity to turn it to slag. They'd waited decades for diplomacy, sanctions, mercy. Now they were moving on. Valkyrie broke the silence. "New target data from Helix Command. Priority strike list, Tier 1 Coalition assets. Authorization confirmed under Protocol WRAITH." Holt nodded. "Put it up." The screen shifted. Names and coordinates filled the air. Not just military hubs, economic centers, science colonies, cultural archives. This wasn't just payback. It was a purge, and Earth hadn't even sent its full hand yet. Sector H9 was the next to fall. Coalition forces had fortified it as a fallback line. 4 defensive satellites, 2 heavy cruisers, and a fortress moon housing over 60,000 non-human military personnel. To most races, it was impenetrable. To humans, it was a training exercise. The Ghostfire moved first, slipping into real space just outside the sensor range. It sent no transmission, no demand. just launched 12 breach drones that tore through the moon's internal systems like termites in a rotting house. Lights went out. Shields failed. Gravity reversed. By the time the second Leviathan, Ravager of Silence, arrived, the defenders were already in chaos. Holt didn't even need to give the order. The Helix fleet moved like an orchestra, precise, synchronized, devastating. They weren't fighting. They were demonstrating. One strike team breached the core reactor of the Fortress Moon using phased torpedoes, an obsolete tech by most galactic standards, but perfect for bypassing modern defense algorithms. Another deployed anti-psyops rounds, non-lethal to humans, but known to scramble the neural patterns of most alien species. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Officers began screaming. A few turned on each other before the pressure sealed their fates. Holt watched it all from the bridge. Cold, detached. "This was a command center," Varek said. "We just wiped it off the map." "They thought Earth couldn't fight back," Holt answered. "Now they know better." Back on Earth, things weren't quiet either. Civilian news channels had been blacked out. Social media feeds were dark. Public broadcasts only played a single repeating message. "Remain indoors. Emergency status level. Omega Black. Trust the system." But the people knew. They saw the warships breaking cloud cover at night. They felt the tremors of orbital cannons tested beneath the oceans. Every man, woman, and child knew Earth wasn't backing down. This wasn't another proxy war. This was legacy. But not everyone in the galaxy was watching in silence. A faction within the coalition, mostly younger species, began asking hard questions. Why did humanity wait so long? How had they hidden this strength? And the most terrifying one, what else haven't they shown us yet? Meanwhile, the older empires, those who had once carved up human colonies like territory on a game board, started mobilizing. Full armadas, strategic councils, treaties forged in panic. One such empire, the Dranari, issued a direct threat. "Earth will face galactic judgment if it continues to escalate. All Helix commanders are to be labeled war criminals. This is our final warning." Holt received the message on a secured channel. He didn't even blink. "Forward this to command," he said, voice calm. "Add one word, accepted." By the time the Helix fleet began its assault on the Dranari frontier, entire systems were abandoning the coalition. Not out of loyalty to Earth, but out of fear. They weren't switching sides. They were surviving. And still Earth hadn't spoken. No press conferences, no leaders on screen, no official declaration of war. Just Holt, just Dagger One, just the sound of silence broken by distant screams over open frequencies. The galaxy had demanded Earth submit. Earth instead had remembered who the hell it was. The message from the Dranari homeworld came through while Dagger One was in orbit above the burned-out remains of Sector H9's command moon. It was everything Holt expected. Formal, arrogant, and delivered in the smug voice of some Dranari elder, wrapped in ceremonial garb that probably hadn't seen battle in 100 years. The elder's tone dripped with superiority. "This rebellion ends now. Earth's aggression threatens the balance. Surrender your fleet, deactivate all Helix units, and submit to Galactic Tribunal Authority. You have 24 Earth hours." Varek watched the transmission end and scoffed. "They're still calling it a rebellion, like we give a damn about their balance." Holt didn't even look up from the console. He was reviewing Helix deployment logs, watching as more Leviathans crawled out of long-forgotten sectors of human space. Sleeping monsters brought back to life. Drones, satellites, deep space kill grids, all coming online in perfect silence. "They're stalling," Holt muttered. "They need time to move their fleets." "Should we buy them some?" Varek said, smirking darkly. Holt nodded. "Yeah, let's give them something to worry about." The next strike wasn't subtle, and that made it vulnerable. The fleet didn't even bother with conventional weapons. They dropped seismic displacers, ancient tech developed during the early Earth-Mars conflicts, designed not to explode, but to twist the tectonic plates of a planet like a knife through meat. Within minutes, Draxus core began tearing itself apart. No bombs, no lasers, just gravity doing what it was never meant to do. Live feeds cut out halfway through the destruction, but not before billions across the galaxy saw the factories split open and sink into molten hell. No human face appeared to explain it. No ambassador gave a speech. The message was simple. You don't get to build your empire on our backs anymore. The fallout was immediate. The Drenari lost all pretense of diplomacy and declared Earth a Class Z hostile entity. They mobilized their entire fleet, 40 capital ships, hundreds of escorts, mercenary support, and allied vessels. It was the largest force assembled in nearly a century. But they still didn't understand what they were walking into. Earth hadn't shown them everything yet. Not even close. In deep orbit around Saturn's sixth moon, a station blinked to life. It hadn't sent a signal in 89 years, not since the final days of the Unification War. Inside, cryopods hissed open, weapons systems warmed up, and deep in the belly of the facility, a single phrase began repeating through internal comms. Black Site 09 operational, releasing Dominion-class AI, preparing Arc engines. Back aboard Dagger 1, Valkyrie caught the signal first. Commander, Black Site 09 has awakened. They're deploying the Arc. Varek frowned. The Arc. That's a myth. Nobody actually built those things. Holt turned slowly, face stone cold. They built them. I saw the prototypes. The Ark was never meant to be used. A colony ship the size of a small moon, equipped with world-killer payloads, AI-generated armies, and the ability to terraform or deconstruct a planet in under a week. The idea was simple. If Earth ever lost a war, the Ark would erase the winners. It was Earth's ultimate failsafe. Now it was on the move. Drenari Command barely had time to react. The Ark dropped into their home system unannounced, not even pretending to care about stealth. It ignored their fleets, ignored their warnings, and then began pulling apart the outer moon using its graviton lattice array. Not destroying it, harvesting it. The Drenari Admiral finally snapped, screaming over wide-band frequencies. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" Holt, for once, answered. His face appeared on their main relay, lit by the red hue of Dagger 1's emergency systems. No medals, no uniform pomp. Just eyes like iron and a voice full of quiet, unshakable rage. "You treated us like animals, like pests you could control. You killed our civilians, erased our colonies, enslaved our history, and you expected us to thank you for the scraps. This isn't war," he added. "This is us remembering who we are." The screen cut. The Ark fired. The Drenari capital burned for 3 days. After that, the galaxy finally stopped pretending. The coalition began to fracture. Smaller species broke treaties. Independent systems fled their alignments. Fear ruled every council meeting. Leaders whispered the same question behind closed doors. If this is what Earth does alone, what happens if someone joins them? And still, Holt hadn't called for peace. He hadn't offered terms. Because there were no terms, there was only the reckoning. And it wasn't finished. The war was no longer in question. Earth had proven its power. The galaxy understood now. Humans were never weak. They'd been silent, simmering under the weight of humiliation, quietly sharpening their claws while everyone else laughed and poked. Now the laughter was gone. Entire sectors were emptying. The coalition was cracking like glass under heat, with once loyal allies turning neutral, neutral powers turning cowardly, and the rest scrambling for contingency plans they should have made a century ago. But as the galaxy panicked, something shifted aboard Dagger 1. It started small, a misaligned data feed, a corrupted navigational beacon, then an unauthorized communication link to a restricted Earth military channel. Valkyrie picked it up instantly. "Commander," she said flatly, "I have detected a breach in primary encryption layers. Origin, internal." Holt's eyes narrowed. "Internal? You're sure?" "Confirmed. The signal is looping through auxiliary power systems to mask its path." Varek leaned off the railing, suddenly alert. "Someone's leaking our location?" "More than that," Valkyrie said. "They're transmitting fleet movements, helix codes, Leviathan targeting data." It hit Holt like a hammer. Someone aboard was feeding the coalition. They locked down the ship. Varek led a security team of hardened Terran veterans, no second chances, no hesitation. One by one, they cleared decks, secured terminals, and interrogated crew. It didn't take long. The traitor wasn't a spy, not a saboteur, just a junior officer, nervous, pale, sweating bullets as they dragged him onto the bridge. Holt looked at him. No anger in his face, just disappointment that cut deeper than rage. "Why?" he asked, voice quiet. The man stammered. "You don't understand, Commander. This war, it's going too far. We're burning entire planets. We're monsters now. They were offering peace. I just wanted it to stop." Varek stepped forward, gun half raised. "You just put the whole fleet at risk for a fantasy." "No!" the officer cried. "They said if I sent the right intel, they'd open talks, give Earth a seat, end the bloodshed." Holt cut him off. "You thought they'd forgive us? After what they did? They don't want peace. They want submission. You didn't save lives, you just marked targets." The bridge fell silent. Then Holt pulled his sidearm, aimed, and fired. No speech, no trial, just the sound of betrayal being erased. Varek flinched as the officer dropped, blood pooling under the polished floor. "We'll need to sweep the others. If one cracked, more might." "They won't," Holt said, holstering the pistol. "Not after that." But the damage was done. Within hours, a coalition strike fleet dropped into proximity. 5 destroyers. Fast, efficient, no broadcasts, no negotiation. They were coming for Dagger 1. "Brace for contact!" Varek shouted as alarms lit up. "Shields up! Arm all batteries!" The ship groaned, panels vibrating as Valkyrie rerouted power to emergency thrusters. Holt stayed calm, directing countermeasures while reviewing the strike pattern. "They're trying to isolate us from the Leviathan group," Valkyrie said. "This is surgical." "They want the symbol," Holt muttered. "Cut off the head, rattle the rest." He knew the play. It was a kill shot, not meant to win the war, just shake the resolve of Earth's rising fleet. But Dagger 1 wasn't built to break. The first blast rocked the starboard side, hull plating flared, systems screamed. 2 more impacts followed, fast and violent. Varek barked orders to redirect counterfire. Rail turrets spun, locking onto heat signatures. 3 enemy ships lost shields immediately. But it wasn't enough. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and one of the destroyers was closing in fast. That's when Holt made the call. "Initiate Valkyrie override," he ordered. "Command level priority. Unlock protocol ORION." Varek spun. "Wait, that's suicide. The core'll overload in 30 seconds. "I know," Holt said, stepping toward the command deck. "But they want to destroy us? Let's make it cost them." Valkyrie responded without pause. "Override accepted. Charging Orion core detonation." He turned to Varek. "Get to the pods. And you? I'll fly it in." The rest was chaos. Alarms howled. Crew scrambled. Escape pods launched into the black. And Holt stayed behind. He guided Dagger 1 manually toward the enemy flagship, her hull battered and cracked, but still flying. A ghost ship. A coffin. But in his hands, she was still a weapon. The enemy destroyers reacted too late. Their formation split. One tried to pull away. Dagger 1 slammed into the center vessel just as the Orion core went critical. There was no sound, just a flash. A supernova in miniature. 3 coalition ships evaporated in the blast, and Commander Holt vanished with them. The escape pods were recovered hours later by Helix command ships. Varek stood among the surviving crew, face like stone. He didn't say a word, just stared into the void where Holt had made his last move. And somewhere in that emptiness, the galaxy felt the shift. Holt had given them the spark. Now humanity had fuel. They called it a martyr's strike. News of Dagger 1's final charge spread like wildfire through human and alien systems alike. The feed was everywhere. Grainy footage of the Terran destroyer crashing into the Coalition flagship, followed by the impossible brightness of the Orion core detonation. One ship had taken out 3 destroyers and crippled a 4th. And at the heart of it all, the man whose name now echoed across every battlefield. Commander Holt. To some, he was a madman. To others, a hero. But to most of the galaxy, he was a warning. Helix Command immediately shifted into a new gear. Holt's sacrifice didn't weaken the human fleet. It ignited it. The Leviathans no longer waited for formal targeting orders. Strike groups began operating autonomously, wiping out listening posts, patrol fleets, and border fortresses across 16 sectors. The aggression escalated. Fast. In less than 2 weeks, 4 major coalition strongholds fell. The humans didn't negotiate, didn't pause, didn't explain. They hit like hammers, then vanished into black space before the enemy could regroup. The message was clear: humanity wasn't stopping. But behind the victories, cracks were forming. The fleet was fracturing. Without Holt, the Leviathan captains argued. Old Earth-based factions started whispering again. Mars Command wanted strategic holds. Lunar Brass pushed for a peace negotiation before it was too late. Even some civilian colonies, terrified of further retaliation, started pulling support from Earth's war budget. The unity Holt gave them was bleeding out. And that's when the message came in. Encrypted. Ultra-black channel. Old Terran code format not used since the first Helix tests. It wasn't from Earth. It wasn't from the Leviathans. It was just coordinates and one line. Command lives. Trust nothing. Come alone. Varek stared at it for hours before speaking a word. At first he thought it was a sick joke. Some psychological operation by the Coalition to destabilize morale. But no Coalition AI could spoof that encryption. The code embedded inside had Holt's biometric ID key, his exact neural signature. Impossible, Varek muttered, gripping the data chip so tightly his fingers went white. He died. I saw it. There was nothing left. But the coordinates weren't fake. They pointed to a dead zone, an uncharted asteroid belt beyond Sector 12K, long believed uninhabitable due to radiation storms. No traffic, no stations, no records. Exactly the kind of place someone like Holt would go if he didn't want to be found. Varek took a stolen scout frigate. No escort, no reports filed. Just a bag of weapons, 3 stim pens, and a tracker rigged to send one signal if he died. Burn everything. It took 36 hours to reach the zone. Radiation scrambled his instruments. The AI went blind. Comms cut out. Then the asteroid moved. Not drifted. Not spun. Moved on thrusters. A docking bay cracked open in its side like the mouth of some ancient creature, and Varek's ship was pulled inside by a gravity well strong enough to snap steel. He braced for impact. Then everything went black. He woke up strapped to a surgical table. No restraints, no guards, just the faint buzz of oxygen cycling and an ancient, flickering light strip above his face. And then a shadow moved. A man stepped into view, bearded, gaunt, with an old Earth combat vest and a long scar running down the side of his neck. He walked with a slight limp, but his eyes were the same. Cold, sharp, unyielding. Varric stared. "Holt?" The man nodded once. "They weren't ready," Holt said, voice dry. "And we're not done." Varric sat up slowly, shaking. How?" "I ejected seconds before the core detonated. Cloaked pod. No tracking. Coalition never even knew it existed. Black Site pulled me out. Spent 6 weeks rebuilding what was left of my bones." "Why fake your death?" Holt leaned forward, expression grim. "Because Earth needed a martyr. Not a politician. Not another damn general giving speeches. A myth. Someone the fleet could follow without question. And now? Now they've gone too far. They're splintering, fighting over scraps of power. That's what happens when humans win too fast. We forget why we started." Varric swallowed. "So what's next?" Holt turned toward a terminal and tapped in a code. The screen lit up with the image of a massive, unfinished Leviathan ship, twice the size of old Earth's Grief. Underneath it, a file name blinked. Project Nemesis. "They think the Leviathan fleet is our final weapon," Holt said. "It isn't." The Nemesis wasn't a ship. It was the end of restraint. Varric stood on the observation deck of the hidden shipyard, staring out through reinforced glass at the half-completed monstrosity suspended in black space. It wasn't sleek or beautiful like other Leviathans. It looked angry, all jagged plating, exposed rail matrices, and plasma venting ports the size of battleships. It didn't hum like a war machine. It growled. Holt stood beside him, arms folded, eyes locked on the beast he'd kept buried from even Helix command. "She's not meant to fight fleets," he said. "She's meant to break empires." Varric swallowed. "You think it'll come to that?" Holt didn't look away. "It already has." Back in galactic space, Earth's war had reached a fever pitch. The Drenari Empire had fallen. The Stra Confederacy had broken into civil war. 3 major coalition races had surrendered outright, not to negotiate, but to survive. And still no peace offer came from Earth. No terms, no conditions, because this wasn't a negotiation. It was a correction. The coalition knew this now, and they were terrified. That's why they summoned the Core Alignment Protocol, an ancient military doctrine no one had invoked in 1,000 years. Every remaining superpower, every last alliance, and every scrap of authority in the galaxy was ordered to combine into one final unified fleet. Not to hold ground, to end Earth. It was the largest armada ever formed, over 1,000 ships, carriers, war cruisers, energy lancers capable of vaporizing moons, AI-coordinated strike wings, and weapons tech humanity hadn't even seen before. And they pointed it all at Sol. Earth Command knew they were coming. From lunar cities to Mars defense lines, every Terran orbital platform was activated. Civilian populations were moved into deep shielded bunkers. The Leviathans gathered, war-worn but deadly. Automated kill satellites lit up across the Kuiper belt. Even the Ark returned, docked near Neptune, engines still glowing from its last harvest. But they all knew it wouldn't be enough. Not against that many. That's when Holt made his move. He didn't return through official channels. 1 minute, Earth's High Command was locked in a desperate, shouting argument over fallback strategies. The next, Holt's voice cut through the chamber. "Enough." Every general, admiral, and politician froze. The signal was untraceable. The image was grainy. But there was no mistaking it. Commander Holt was alive, and he was taking control. "You've all played soldier long enough," he said. "Now step aside." No one argued. Varek landed at Earth's outer defense grid 12 hours before the enemy fleet arrived. Nemesis followed, silent, black, and still unfinished. But its core systems were live. Holt stood on the command bridge, staring at the coming onslaught. Varek approached slowly. "We don't even know what half the systems do. She's not ready." "She doesn't have to be," Holt said, powering up the neural core interface. "She just has to be angry enough." The galaxy thought it had seen what humanity was capable of. The Helix fleet, the Ark, the orbital strikes, the cold silence of their kill tech. They hadn't seen Nemesis. The final battle began with no warning. The Coalition Armada dropped into Sol space like a rain of steel and fire. Jupiter's moons lit up with explosions. Plasma lances ripped through asteroid bases. Leviathan Group Alpha held the line for 16 straight hours. But the numbers were too much. They started falling. Then Nemesis moved. She didn't fire traditional weapons. She unleashed. Gravitic torsion fields crushed destroyers into cubes. Singularity torpedoes warped time around impact points, slowing enemies to a crawl before ripping them apart. Her AI didn't coordinate. It hunted. One by one, Nemesis painted capital ships and deleted them. It wasn't a ship. It was revenge, forged in steel. But even Nemesis couldn't hold forever. The Coalition had its own monsters, multi-core capital carriers, distortion-shielded artillery platforms, and swarm hive weapons designed to devour a ship's hull molecule by molecule. Nemesis bled. Hull breaches opened. Her power core began to overheat. Holt stood at the neural console, blood running from his nose, body shaking. He was wired into her systems directly, merged. She moved as he thought. She killed as he commanded. And when the enemy reached Earth orbit, he made the final call. "Activate Omega Override," he said, voice barely a whisper. Varek's voice came through static. "That'll destroy you." Holt didn't answer. He looked at Earth one last time. Blue, battered, beautiful. Then he pressed the final command. Nemesis lit up like a dying star. Her core went critical, not in meltdown, but in purpose. A controlled implosion burst outward, disintegrating space-time across 100 kilometers. Ships vanished, debris dissolved. Everything near her simply ceased to exist. The Coalition fleet died with her. And so did Commander Holt. 3 days later, Earth was silent. No new attacks came, no fleets moved. The galaxy simply stopped. The war was over. Not because treaties were signed, not because peace was brokered, but because there was no one left with the will to fight what Holt had become. Varek stood over a field of black glass outside what used to be an orbital command facility. In his hand, he held Holt's last recorded message, encrypted, marked for him alone. He played it once. "If you're hearing this, it means I did what had to be done. Don't grieve. Don't build statues. Don't turn me into a hero. Just remember who we were before they broke us. And make damn sure they never forget again." The galaxy learned to live with fear after that. Earth rebuilt in silence. But from that day forward, no species dared speak of humanity without respect. Because the moment humans stopped pretending to be weak, the galaxy went silent. Forever.